I would hand it over to Adam.
Okay. Hi. This talk is intro to Frontend tooling, but to give it some context, it is largely dependent on how we at Sparkbox do our work. So, just real quick, who am I? Who I am? All the Twitters and things. Okay. Like I said, about front-end tooling, and a lot of this is kind of inspired from this blog post that Michael Lopp wrote. He writes a site called Rants and Repose, and that the foamy rules for rapid tools. And at Sparkbox, in a lot of our talks, we use this beer icon to indicate like a topic that we could go deeper on later, over a beer per se. And I kind of took it and took it in our direction, and it's get foamy. And so if you see that, like, yeah, that's a topic that we can talk about endlessly some other time, but it's also a topic where I have a particular opinion, and I'm kind of like, that's what I think is right, but there is no right answer. It's, what's best for you. And like I said, this is tooling at Sparkbox. So this is everyone should do tooling. This is just kind of what we found and what works best for us. And when you're talking about tooling, one thing that I found helpful is not to be overwhelmed, because there are a plethora of options. There's grunt, there's gulp, there's brunch, there's, you could go crazy on this stuff. So don't be overwhelmed. Let's all remember, web is software, and like all software, it's hard. So that kind of lays the groundwork. And another thing I want to keep in mind is that we stand on the shoulders of giant robots. A lot of this stuff makes writing new tools super easy. You can go write a grunt plugin as JavaScript. Most of you know JavaScript. So let's keep that in mind, along with the don't be overwhelmed aspect of this. And that's from an Isaac Newton quote, obviously. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And giants, in my opinion, is source control, homebrew, CLI, JavaScript, TypeScript, all that stuff. Those are our giants in this topic. So let's get foamy. These are a couple quotes that Michael Lopp wrote in his post, and that kind of really just influenced my thinking. The correct tool is going to make you exponentially more productive. So if you're wondering, how do I use the right tool? Is it making you more productive? Then it might be the right tool. Another thing he said is, my tools are my tools. Choosing a thing makes it yours. The choice is the result of the unique mix of logic, superstition, stubbornness, and experience that fits you. Okay, so this is a personal thing. Like, that's why I'm trying to be very careful with how we work at Sparkbox. These are my tools, not necessarily the right tools, but they're right for me. But it's something that we need to talk about, and we need to hash through to get to that point where we're stubborn about it, or we're a little superstitious about it. And never stop looking. This is why the blasphemy rule is the most important. My tools are always fighting for their life. And that's the thing, is while we need to be kind of zealots for the tool we're using, at the same time, be willing to concede, like, hey, gulp might be better than grunt. We should look at it, or something like that. Anything's up for replacement. Okay? So this slide kind of sums it up. This is from Adi Osamani's talk that he gave on front-end workflow. And it really sums up just the craziness that we deal with. And it's hard not to be overwhelmed by all these things. But it helps to kind of get a mental model. And so we're going to kind of start talking about all this stuff from the perspective of source control, which is where we all start at Sparkbox. So all of our projects are on source control. We use GitHub. If you want to use Bitbucket, that's great. Just use some sort of source control. Most of you probably know Git and SVN. But real quickly, Git makes collaboration effortless. GitHub and Bitbucket both have really good issue trackers if you don't have that already in your software, especially your front-end code. Removes any fear of losing code, and stashing is awesome, that's how I feel when I want to stash something. And if you haven't been to this Tumblr, you're missing out on some fun times. Okay, it's just a series of GIFs like this with a title about source control or command line things, and it's a riot. If you're kind of not familiar with Git and you've been wanting to take the time to get into it, these are a couple posts that kind of make the case for Git and also kind of explain the features and what's good about them, particularly like the Git Parable here by Thomas Warner over at GitHub. It's a really cool just kind of story, if you haven't read it, of why Git was made, basically, like why we need it, why we use it, what its benefits are. This one right here is a talk at Steel City Ruby. It's a video, 30 minutes long, and that's a really good one, even if you know Git, about commit messages and why they're useful and what you can learn from them. And like I said, remember, use the tool that makes your team and your work better. So if you're not a Git guy, you're mercurial, go for it. Just bear with me. All right. Okay. Another thing that I've been thinking a lot about is that front-end dev is part art, part science. I mean, we've all been here, right? I mean, we'd like to think that CSS is science, but it's a styling language. It's not a regular language. It doesn't make, like, this is inline block in i7. That's what that is right there. I mean, that's just throw it out the window. Just do it already. There you go. So, if this is what we're dealing with, Sass offers a way to kind of tame the beast a little bit. Like I said, CSS isn't a regular language. You can't do conditions. You can't have variables. You can't do some of these things that we're used to, right? Sass gives us variables. Right here we have true false. We have an integer over there that's based on a multiplier. And I can reference these things throughout my code. This makes my code better. This makes my code dry, right? This makes it more programming, really. This, I don't know if you can see all that. This is the rem mixin we use at Sparkbox to use rem units. So if we want to, this covers pretty much all of the bases. So you can see at the top, if we want to set a font size in rem, we just pass font size as the first argument in the rem mixin, and then the size, and it will spit out the rem. Yep.
What's a rem?
A rem is a relative m.
What's a relative m?
In m, well, there's m's and there's rems. Rems are relative to m's. M's are a unit in CSS. The problem with that the problem is with m's. Yeah. The problem with m's though is they refer to each other. So if you have like a parent that's set in rems, and then you have a font size of like his child in rems, that's going to refer to the parent to get the actual size. Rem is nice because it's always referring to the root, right? So it's more predictable, which is why it's the better measurement.
So rem refers to the root even though it's called relative?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. But m's are useful, but they're not, like, they're useful if you have a situation where you want a child's properties to be relational to its parent, right? So you have like a list item or something. But we typically go with rems just because it moves out of the way of a lot of the headaches. So, problem with these though is i7, i8, I think i8 doesn't support rem. So here in our font size, you can set it in rem, and then it also generates a rule for i7 that puts that font size with a keyword. Now you might think, well, why not just do it in pixels, right? Like 1 rem, 16 pixels, done deal. The reason is, if you do it with a keyword, IE7 can scale that size then. So if you do like, command plus, and bump the size up, 16 pixels on IE7 isn't going to work quite right. If it's a keyword, you can scale it up and down. So Sass takes a lot of complexity right here, and it's just automatic. You don't need to think about it anymore. It just works. And then down here, we're just doing stuff with padding and margin, so you can do shorthand properties and stuff. But this is where Sass, like, we don't have to write all this out every time we want to use rems. It's a one-line include. Here's the other one. This is our breakpoint that we use, breakpoint mixin, for responsive stuff. And it's very opinionated in that we can only do min-widths with this mixin, which is how we work, small to large. But you just pass it the query, and we have some variables here. So if we want to have this query be supported for browsers that don't support media queries, it'll generate that rule, and then you can also set a max width on when you want that behavior to stop working. A little more straightforward than the other one, but again, this saves us a ton of time of duplicating things in CSS and stuff like that. It's really easy to start with Sass. And again, less, if you want to use less, that's another great CSS preprocessor to use. One thing that we use a lot with Sass is Compass, which is a collection of mixins for Sass. So with Compass, it handles a lot of the browser inconsistencies and vendor prefixes and stuff for you. So if you're doing a box shadow, it'll spit out all the different syntaxes for a box shadow or something like that. All right, now we're getting into some JavaScript stuff. Or should I say CoffeeScript stuff? CoffeeScript is something that we use for most of our front-end work. The reason that is, my favorite thing, is some of the syntax things it offers. So, this is just a variable at the top. And this is the here.doc syntax. Who's familiar with here.doc syntax?
So like PHP, sort of.
Nah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
In this case, though, if you wanted to have a string of HTML in JavaScript, you'd have to escape your quotes, or it'd be kind of messy. In CoffeeScript, you just do the triple double quote, and then your markup, whatever you want it to be. You just write the HTML. Now, don't worry about it. And you can even interpolate the variable with the pound bracket right there, which will output 5 then, right there after foo. And this is what this would look like if this was JavaScript. That's kind of a mess, and that's error prone, right? With this, you can spot if you have an errant quote messing up your markup. You can spot if you're missing a div tag, right? Not as easy here. Update. It's not update. But I remember specifically, it was JMac and I spent about an hour or two one day trying to figure out why this slider wasn't working. And the end result was, after we converted to CoffeeScript, and he was like, we need to make it all here.doc syntax because there's all these strings being thrown around. And so we did that, and the problem was, I think we'd forgotten to escape one of the double quotes in the JavaScript. It was like an hour or two of fixing this bug and trying to figure out. Once we got to CoffeeScript, there was the problem right there. So that's a win. That makes your code better, right? Another thing that's great about CoffeeScript is it enforces consistent JavaScript. So if you're using it on a team, the JavaScript is going to be a lot more uniform that it produces, right? So there's just an inline if, just another feature, like an example of how CoffeeScript works. And again, JavaScript, that's what that would look like. Okay, how do you get CoffeeScript? npm install right there. Pretty straightforward. And again, this is how we've kind of established we're doing all our front end work. These are all preprocessors. Here's two more for doing markup. So Hamel or Jade, they're both preprocessors for your markup. Now, this is an area where I don't really like either of them. I much prefer the Emmet plugin and Vim, and I'm good to go. Emmet is available for just about every text editor that I can think of. And it lets you do kind of CSS style selectors in your markup that expand to do the closing tag, class names, all that kind of stuff. Actually, I'm going to show you that. I'm trying to live code, so hang on. Okay. So, open up this guy up. Okay. So we can do, so Emmet basically just fills all this stuff in. So instead of writing this, right? Oh, I can't type.
Did you make the font a little bit bigger?
Yeah. Good? That's it. Yeah.
Bump it up.
Keep going.
There you go.
Instead of having to write that, I can do something like this. And I trigger Emmet, and it spits it all out. And now my cursor is ready to keep typing in this div. You can also do stuff like this. So, there we go. And then this will be a child of this. So this item, child, multiplied by 5. There you go. So I prefer writing, vanilla markup without a preprocessor because the benefits to the preprocessor, mainly speed in this case, I can match that with Emmet, right? But this is something that if you love Amel, cool, that's great. Like no, it's not a bad thing. But this is just kind of like why I prefer to use Emmet plus Vim.
I got a question here in the back.
Yeah.
Is Emmet only available for Vim?
No, like I said, it's available for just about every text editor under the planet. It used to be called Zencoding, but they changed names, which Zencoding was way better. But,
Is that a replacement for Surround, or is it just speedier HTML?
it's speedier HTML and CSS actually.
Okay.
Like it can work in conjunction with Surround.
It can even work with YAML.
Yeah.
You can actually.
Yeah, and the thing with CSS that Emmet does is it will do, if you type like BM and then trigger Emmet, it'll do, MB, trigger Emmet, it'll be, margin bottom, right? It'll expand that out. Ooh, pizza. All right, we'll get through this real quick and then we'll do some pizza. So, if you've never done pre-processor stuff before, and you're like, all right, I'm going to set all this up. You get CoffeeScript set up, you get your SAS set up. This is what you're probably going to feel like after everything starts running. Just like, what? Files everywhere. Things are happening. All right, but let's just think about this. Let's not be overwhelmed. Let's think about this. What are the pros of what we've done? We've made CSS more programming, which is my favorite term. We enforce good JS habits with CoffeeScript, and we're writing our HTML faster. Right? Those are all good things. Cons, we're added some complexity. We have more files to manage. We've added some dependencies. Like now you need CoffeeScript or SAS to run the project. At Sparkbox, we handle this by not checking in the generated CSS or JavaScript. So those just become kind of a build artifact of the process. And we don't check those into our source control. We don't care about those. The SAS lesson CoffeeScript files are now like our source of truth. That's what we're worried about. So you can see like this is a typical project setup right here. And the way we have everything kind of compiling down to a dist directory. So something like that. So you can see our SAS is going to dist, is becoming CSS. Our coffee is going to dist, becoming JavaScript. So just kind of don't be overwhelmed by the chaos, just embrace it. I think, are we ready for pizza? To the left. Yeah.
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I use like none of those things.
Yeah.
So like, do you have any recommendations like getting started? Like, if you were to pick one or two tools, what would you recommend starting with?
SAS is my personal favorite. It's
Right.
kind of the one that I got started with.
Okay.
I think it may offer the easiest entry in that you don't have to use all of it.
Okay.
If you want to get started with SAS, just pick one tiny feature that you might like and just try using that first. So,
Right.
like, variables are cool. I can't do that in CSS. And just start using variables. Don't even like ignore all the other stuff you can do. And slowly get kind of wade into it that way. Instead of just trying to absorb all of it at once. Right. I guess we can go on. Okay, so this is plain more area here, the text editors. But this is kind of where I've landed on this. For front-end work, Sublime Text is a really good editor. Vim is a really good and better editor, in my opinion. But again, we can argue about that. And the thing is, know your editor. That's the bigger point. If you use Sublime, learn the crap out of it. Like, know every little corner of it. Like, if you use Vim, have you tried tmux in Vim? Have you tried, Emmet plugin for Vim? Have you tried Surround, like something I mentioned earlier? One thing with these two that is kind of a not very well known feature, but it's one of my favorites, is the ability to do projects in Sublime. And tmux with Vim offers, being able to resume a session that you started. So let me just show you that real quick. It's one of my favorite things. Or lag. Okay. So I'm in my project on the command line, and I want to make this a tmux session. So now I'm in a tmux session. You know that just because now I have this new white bar. Like, nothing special, right? Let's open up that file I had. Okay, so I'm here, and now let's say I'm done with this project. So I detached from Tmux, and I go work on another one for 6 months. Now I want to come back. I have an alias set up, so I can jump right back into where I was. Same files that were open in Vim, everything's where I left that project. That speeds you up. That makes you faster. That helps with like the mental chaos that goes on when you switch projects. But Sublime, okay, Sublime has this feature, and it's called Projects. And it was, when I was using Sublime, it was the best thing ever. Where are we going? Okay. Okay. So let's open up a file. Project. All the way down here. Okay, so we have our file open in Sublime. Right there on the top menu, we have these project things. And so we can save this project, name it wherever we want, and Sublime dumps a little Sublime project file into the directory you're in. And I've already done that beforehand, if I remember correctly. Yeah, so you can see I already saved this project, but I could save the current location if I wanted to. And what's cool, let's close that, just go here, open these things. There we go. And I had this saved from earlier, and there's all the files that I had open at that moment. So, relatively, same feature set, different text editors. Dig in and figure it out, though. That's kind of the point. In Sublime, even the tabs I had open, the ones I'd selected, it preserved all that stuff, and I just snapped right to it. Hotkey, Shift Command P, would list all the projects you had open. You can filter through them and jump into another one, just like that. This is important stuff. This is stuff that makes you faster, makes you more efficient. But pick one. Or if you have your other, do that. And I'm getting the signal now to do pizza, to read pizza.
All right.
ZSH is a different shell, and its benefits are autocompletion and super customizable prompt. So you can see my prompt, like, you can see right there at the far right in yellow, that's the current Git branch that I'm working with. So immediately I can see, oh, I'm in the refactor branch. And I can see the path to get there. And then this go is actually auto-completing branch names. So instead of typing like git branch, put up, and you go, tab, and be like, oh, I have 2 branches, which one do I want to switch to? And that's, so when I come back to a project, I can see immediately what branch I'm in, and that will also reflect like before the refactor, after the refactor, there'll be a little asterisk if there's uncommitted changes, if the repo state is returned, basically. It'll let you know that little indicator right there. So that's awesome. That saves time. That makes the command line feel a little more friendly because auto-completing just about everything. And it's giving you information aside from just a blinking cursor. And it has Git integration. It has, ZSH has an awesome, or ZSH has an awesome set of plugins for just about everything. And it's real easy to kind of write your own. So I wrote a little one that just auto-completes my project directory. So I keep all my projects under a root directory called projects. And so when I type the command for that, it just lists them all, and I can tab through them, or I can type the first couple letters and then tab and narrow that result set. ZSH stuff. Give it a try. If you don't like it, it's really easy to uninstall and switch back. But it just gives you a little edge in your workflow. So at Sparkbox recently, we've switched to writing most of our markup with handlebars. And the reason we do that is because handlebars allows us to model basic CMS templating without getting into specific CMS quirks. And it separates our content from markup much better than vanilla HTML will. It allows us to, it has various kinds of content, and it puts our markup in chunks because we can include partials, kind of like a PHP include. And the reason that this last one is special is because it also lets us pair up Sass modules with markup modules. So all of a sudden, you might have a sidebar, and that can include a couple different markup modules, which also relate to a couple different Sass modules. And it makes your code a lot more small and compartmentalized. So if you're trying to track down a bug, you don't have like a 700-line Sass file or a 700-line HTML file. You have a 60-line handlebars file. So we use Grunt to power all this stuff. And I should say, this is for front-end work. And then Sparkbox, everything starts as a static site, basically. So it's just a collection of HTML files. That's where we start our templating. Okay. Eventually, it'll move into a Ruby app or Rails app. It'll move into Expression Engine if that's where it's going. The end doesn't really matter. This is just how we start and get our templates done to then move to the final destination. So we use Grunt to power our handlebar stuff. We use specifically the assemble plugin, which you can check out at github.com/assemble. And we use YAML to kind of house all the data. So this will be a little more clear as we see these code snippets. So this is a part of our Grunt file. We have the assemble block, and we're passing it two options. Under our data directory, we have any YAML files in there. We use those as data. And then we have a partials directory. And specifically, this guy is going to be our home page. And that's going to output into our dist directory, like I mentioned earlier, as index.html. Now, this is our YAML file for the home page. So simple title, YAML resources, and then 2 resources. What that looks like, though, for our markup is really nice. This is really short. It's easy to figure out what's going on. And you can extrapolate that. If this were a nav, let's say, you could, with a couple more loops and a little more data, you could have a fully, multi-level nav, and it wouldn't be much longer than this. We were working on a project recently where big site, tons of nav, like 3 levels of navigation, right? Think like, like Apple or, just like tons of menus, right? And the first thing we did, that Rob Tarr did actually, is he took their HTML and ripped out the content in the YAML file and put the markup into a handlebars file, which was about like 60 lines after that. That's way easier to change, make fixes to, stuff like that, versus like having like, oh, which level am I now? Oh no, okay, keep scrolling. Like this is much better. And again, we can pair this then with our Sass. So for our homepage, we have a little content listing guy, and here's our rem font size from earlier. And again, one other cool thing with Sass, I think someone asked it earlier, is valid CSS is valid Sass. So list style none, put that in a Sass file, it works. So if you really want to get started with Sass, copy or just change the file extension to .scss instead of .css, and just start playing around with the variable. It will compile just fine because it understands CSS by default. That's just what we'll put in that. And I can show you real quick. Okay. So we're in this, as you can see, ZSH in the master branch right now. Here's our directory. We can run grunt. Okay. Creates everything, and this grunt is spinning up a server. So if we go to Safari, okay. You go to localhost 5000. This is the handlebars we were looking at earlier. So if we go back into our terminal, and I want to do this. Let's open up the data and start there. Right, so we can change this to wherever we want, and it'll update it. Let's just change that to resources. Run. And you can set this up to do some live reloading and stuff. This is just a really basic example right now. It's a resources change. We didn't change our markup. We just changed the data. So that separation just makes things easier forward as far as bug testing, trying out a new approach. We want to be like, hey, let's see if we can do like a little like off-canvas thing for this list. We wouldn't have to really worry with the markup until we got to like adding a button, right? We could just massage the styles and the data. Back.
So is that YAML file just holding variables that go into the handlebars?
Yeah, it's just holding the actual here. So there's that, and then so down here you can see this is the handlebars file, right? And so for every resource, your resources, just dump it out. And then this is just the title. The basic template, right? But instead of having, every list item listed out, it's just a simple little, and that just makes things easier to grasp.
I understand that, the
Yeah.
handlebars, the YAML sometimes not seen before. What's that stand for?
Yet another.
Yet another one.
Yet another one? Yeah. I always check myself because I'm like, is that a joke? No. Yes.
It's basically JSON with human-friendly syntax.
Exactly. Yeah. It's,
If you think of it as just JSON,
Mhm.
then
and actually, like, Rob Tarr is always saying this because we'll get into a massive YAML file and it won't compile because like I have my indentations wrong or something. And he's like, well, think about like what would this be in JSON, right? And it's like, oh, okay, that fixes it.
You can also feed assemble, the plugin we're using to build
Yeah.
handlebars files in JSON.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
But
accepts the import in
it's
JSON.
a little more. Okay. So, all right, we've covered, the moving parts. Just gonna look at a solution now that kind of harnesses all these pieces together. I've kind of already tipped my hand, but grunt's involved. Shocker. But this is something that's kind of recent. I decided Yeoman has come a long way. Let's take a look at that and see what that can do for us. And Yeoman's awesome because it kind of packages up Grunt and Bower and makes them work together really nicely and kind of takes some of the pain away of managing all that. And let's just break down real quick what those things are individually. So Grunt's the task runner, which we've talked about here before. I like to think of it this way: it provides the muscle. And to get started with Grunt, npm install G, Grunt CLI. Grunt is going to be responsible for most of like the flashy stuff, right? It's going to be responsible for pre-processing, doing the cog script, handle HTML, handlebars to HTML, that kind of stuff. Doing concatenate and test. Has an awesome plugin ecosystem. Substantial of the giants, remember? And this is probably my favorite feature of Grunt. It's just that right now there's just an explosion of people putting out their plugins, and it's real easy to kind of get a solution that fits kind of how you want to work. And this brings up the point, like, make or modify your tools. If you don't like how any of the Grunt plugins are doing something that you want to do, modify one, fork it on GitHub, or write your own. It's JavaScript, it's Node, It's not too difficult to get started. Bower, okay? Bower is a package manager. There's a couple right now. This space isn't as kind of steady as the Grunt space is right now, but Bower is another Node module. And kind of my favorite piece about Bower is that it runs over Git and it's package agnostic. So it's really a basic fetcher. It goes and gets the libraries that you want it to, pulls them into your project. The cool part of it, though, is since it's pretty basic, you can script it, which is what Yeoman kind of did. Autocompletes on ZSH, and we use Grunt to kind of move those libraries around once Bower gets them. So all Bower is worried about is getting the specific version of jQuery that you asked for and the specific version of Modernizer and pulling those into your project. Once they're in the project, use Grunt to move those around, concat them, whatever you want to do. That's all. Bower is just making sure of, like, does this project have the right version of X library? And you can check that in your source control, and that way your team is all pulling in the right versions of things. Yeoman ties everything together. But really, it's an opinionated collection of Grunt tasks with scaffolding. And the scaffolding is the important part. Yeoman lets you set up your project directory, like your starting project directory, however you want. And it's repeatable then. And you can get started by installing Yo, which is just the best. Like, you can type Yo and just tell it to do something. That's awesome. The one thing with Yeoman, and the reason it kind of took me so long to get there, is when it first came out, it was it was competing with Grunt in a way. It was trying to do some of the same things. And on their wiki, they talk about kind of how they got to 1.0, and it explained it. And this is helpful to me and hopefully to other people of what Yeoman is for, what it does. Looking at their that wiki page kind of made it click in my brain. But again, Yeoman has a bunch of generators. If none of them do what you want to do, which in our case was yes, write your own. Generators are essentially pull it down, and it scaffolds out a project a specific way and gives you a bunch of grunt tasks, power, dependencies, and you're on your way, right? But I didn't like how these them worked, and I wanted to play around. So we wrote our own. This is still in its infancy for the most part. It works. There's just some things I'd like to do. We call it MG, Magnesium, Sparkbox, Firestarter. Follow the trail. There's actually wrote a blog post about it, which you can find at that bit.ly link. If you want to try it out, npm install G, generator MG, and from that point, this is the best right here. YoMG, there it is. But so make a directory, cd into the directory, run YoMG, and this is what it's going to pop up. Like that dude's awesome. It's just incredible. What would you like to call this project? Let's say give it a name. And then you have a seizure. And most of what MG does right now is just scaffolds out our projects. So it makes sure that all of these files exist so that we kind of all have a consistent starting point for our projects to use all the preprocessors and copy script and data files and all that stuff. And that's all it does right now. Going forward, you can write tests in Yeoman, so you can wrap some tests around and make sure it's consistently what you think it's going to be. And there's some more optimizations I'd like to do with it. But check it out, learn from my mistakes, and see if something that would fit how you're working, or if this fits what you want to do. So that's all I have. I have plenty of time for questions though, and there's more pizza, I know that. So, thank you. There's no questions, I'm eating more pizza. Yes?
I've been using Jekyll for the last couple projects.
Okay.
How would you compare that to Assemble or Handlebars? Would you use one versus the other? Or is it just kind of like a personal preference?
It depends kind of, if you want to deploy to GitHub pages, Jekyll probably makes more sense because it's built in there.
Mm-hmm.
But I know Tar, like a week ago or something, was it a week ago?
At CodeMash.
At CodeMash, yeah. We had a Jekyll site and he was really frustrated because he couldn't get some of the, I forget what it was.
It was a pain.
It was a pain. Yeah, exactly. It was a pain. So he literally ripped out the Jekyll stuff and just dropped in our YoMG. Good. Because it just produces static HTML, which is the end result of Jekyll, right? So we just uploaded the disk folder and done. So it really depends kind of what you want to do. If it's working for you, if it's not working for you, switch.
It's working for me, but the idea of separating the content versus the markup intrigues me.
Yeah, yeah.
You mentioned earlier about matching markup partials with style partials.
Yeah.
Do you namespace the style declarations so that they only apply to things within that partial, or how do you avoid collisions when all that stuff gets concatenated together?
With the styles?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not so much that if I have box-content.hbs, which is a handlebars partial, and I have box-content.scss, which is a Sass thing, I will reference other styles that I know are in other modules, but those are kind of like the specific ones for that piece. And namespacing is just don't have the same class name for the most part.
But we would start all those sashes with like box-content dash something.
Yeah.
So you are namespacing.
Yeah.
If they're specific to that thing, but at the same time, if you want
But you might reference other things as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
So for handlebars templates, you compile the JavaScript in the project, and there's usually a ton of white space in strings in that JavaScript. Can you guys have any way to rip that out and kind of minify it?
I'm not sure. I think assemble handles all that. So from our perspective, we're literally doing like we'll see the handlebars flat, and then at the end it's just HTML. It just goes through the magic
But it
box.
is minified somewhere in there.
I don't know.
What's the question?
If
Does it
it should be a
minify
white
your
space.
HTML that starts out as a handlebars template with lots of white space, or is the white space still in the final JavaScript and whatever output?
We don't generally minify the HTML. I think there are some grunt plugins to minify the generated HTML, so you could. Yeah, you could use
Use
it.
it, yeah, but, all right. Yeah.
Are we minifying JavaScript? Or
We
CSS?
minify our JavaScript.
So some of the components we are, others we aren't.
That's something I'd run into before, and I kind of wrote my own little, like, very hacky minification plugin, but I was wondering if there was something more standard.
Sometimes you gotta be careful with white space in HTML.
Yeah, I basically reduced
Yeah.
all occurrences of more than one white space to one, and call that good enough.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Like, if you have pre-tags and you're relying on like code samples things to have like communication.
Yeah, and I did have that in
I
this
mean, it
project.
wouldn't take much to put a grunt test or gzip and only did that for releases.
Yeah.
Fair
It's
enough.
just a thing, like, we
What's that?
try to not minify our JavaScript development. But
Oh,
that's,
yeah.
that's in a production.
Yeah, this is only for production,
Right.
too, and it all gets used so.
Because then you don't have to ask.
CoffeeScript?
Yeah.
Are you aware of any either editor or browser plugins that allow you to debug CoffeeScript as CoffeeScript as opposed to debugging the compiled
Yeah. Not that source maps, I think someone
Source
said
maps.
that. Yeah, source maps,
And then
but
Chrome-
you're still looking at the JavaScript, if I'm correct, in the browser now. Okay.
Source maps would give you the CoffeeScript.
Yes, source maps. Or, and I think you can use that with the CoffeeScript stuff. So,
It's just another option.
yeah.
Yeah, support for that is very based on browsers. So like Chrome broke support for source maps
And I haven't
about 6
forgiven
months
it
ago.
since. No.
They fixed it, but things changed. So you just kind of we haven't put that back in our plugin because it was broken for a while.
Right.
It's like a hidden feature in Chrome still, isn't it? You have to know some magic URL to enable it.
No, it's in the like if you go to open up the web dev tools
Yeah.
and then question mark, bring up the options. There's a source map checkbox.
Wait, who put those vegetables up there?
Where's the meat?
Yep.
I've been using less, but I was wondering, is SAS kind of like, and less, it's like American English and British English, are they about the same, or are there fundamental differences?
They're pretty comparable feature-wise. The syntax is different for some stuff. We like SAS mainly because it's a little more advanced in what you can do with it as far as comparisons and within your mixins and stuff, which less doesn't do, but both are good in our opinion. So
Thank you.
Go ahead, stylus.
Yeah, stylus.
I don't think you
I was going to say, Les's distinction is that it's written in JavaScript and it can actually run in the browser, and like you can do the compilation there. And its syntax is less feature-rich. Like it doesn't have loops.
Right.
Like you can't actually loop over like an array of things and make like, a bunch of tags or something. But SAS has that notion easily. And stylus is another option. It's also written in JavaScript. It skews more towards like making less markup to do more things. But it's also not nearly as widely adopted as less and SAS.
We adopted SAS because we do Rails development. Primarily, that's really why we chose it, because, I mean, there's advantages to using it over less, I believe, but stylus would be another good option. We just do Rails development, SAS comes packaged with that, you know. So.
Sure, okay.
I think it's worth noting too that Compass is there with SAS.
That's true.
That's something we don't have with Less and Stylus.
Yeah, Less has, Bootstrap has their thing for Less, which is the best package of like extra mixins for Less. Stylus has Nib, and there's other ones. Each one has its own like set of libraries. But SAS is the only one that has like multiple good ones, because there's Compass and there's Bourbon. Bourbon's really good. It's made by ThoughtBot, which is a giant Rails shop out of Austin, and it has some amazing mixins and stuff for doing gradients and things like that also.
What was the stylus one you said?
The stylus one's called nib, N-I-B.
Okay.
And the nice thing about stylus is all their mixins are transparent, so you can literally declare a mixin that is like box, height, and shadow, and you won't know it, but that's passing through a mixin that's adding all the vendor prefixes. And it's also like an order of magnitude faster than SAS until libsass kind of hits full adoption. Because it's written in JavaScript and nib is much quicker than Ruby.
Questions? All right. Tar, do you have any last words or?
No, I just want to say thanks for coming.